Democratic lawmakers from Texas holed up in Illinois this week in what may become the opening salvo in a national battle over congressional redistricting. From Capitol News, Illinois, it's Friday, August 8th, 2025. I'm Peter Hancock, and this is Capitol Cast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Capitol Cast, a regular podcast from Capitol News, Illinois. As we speak to you today, a contingent of Democrats from the Texas House of Representatives are lodging in a suburban Chicago hotel. Their purpose is to prevent the Texas House from mustering a quorum and thereby blocking Republicans from pushing through a mid-decade congressional redistricting plan that President Donald Trump has urged them to pass. The political stakes are huge. Republicans currently hold a razor-thin majority in the U.S. House in Washington. Midterm elections are right around the corner in 2026, and if Democrats take back the majority, they could block Trump's legislative agenda for the rest of his term and make him a true lame duck president. To prevent that, Trump wants Texas to redraw its maps to give the GOP 5 more seats from the Lone Star State. He's also urging other Republican-led states like Missouri and Indiana to redraw their maps. Texas Democrats, hoping to stop this train in its tracks, fled their statehouse in Austin on Sunday and came to Illinois, where they were warmly welcomed by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Here's Texas House Minority Leader Gene Wu speaking at a news conference shortly after their plane landed at O'Hare.
The tool they're using is a racist, gerrymandered map. A map that seeks to use racial lines to divide hard-working communities who have spent decades building up their power and strengthening their voices. And Governor Abbott is doing this in submission to Donald Trump.
Now, nobody enjoys a fight with Donald Trump quite like Governor J.B. Pritzker. He has said on a number of occasions that if Texas Republicans follow through with this plan, leaders in Democratic-led states like Illinois may choose to retaliate. That could be hard in Illinois for 2 reasons. One, the Illinois map is already gerrymandered in favor of Democrats about as far as it can go, 14-3. And 2, people who want to run for Congress next year have already started circulating their nominating petitions. So, at a news conference in Springfield this week, I asked the governor if it was already too late to redraw Illinois maps in time for the 2026 elections.
It's never too late, Peter. And the truth is that, we're going to think about all the options. We've already taken one of those options, I think you're aware, which is about 6 weeks ago, I talked about the possibility that Texas House Democrats would, in fact, have to leave their state. And I made it clear to them, and as I have for the last 6 weeks, that they're welcome in the state of Illinois. They took us up on that invitation. They could have really gone anywhere. I think they chose Illinois because they know that we will protect them, that there's a safe haven here in the state. And so I'm very proud to have them.
And the drama has continued from there. Also this week, Texas Senator John Cornyn asked the FBI to help track down the runaway lawmakers. The FBI said yes, they would, but that's about all they were able to do. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has also talked about declaring their seats vacant and appointing replacements if they don't return to Texas. Here to talk about this and help us understand what all is going on is my colleague Ben Szalinski. Ben, where does all this end?
That's a good question, and kind of what I'm waiting for as well is when will this end? Honestly, we could have just opened up a big can of worms here, and this might just be the start. We've heard the governor has had to answer questions like that. When will this end? And I think it will end in his mind when Republicans in Texas and other states, when Donald Trump stops calling for mid-decade redistricting to, try and prevent some sort of big loss that could happen for the Republicans in the 2026 election. So it may never really truly end unless Republicans don't go forward with any of these redistricting plans.
Well, earlier I was going back through some of the stories that we wrote when Illinois was going through redistricting following the 2020 census, and Democrats here were widely accused of gerrymandering the maps, both the congressional maps and the state legislative maps. The legislative maps went to a court case was filed. It went before a 3-judge federal panel up in Chicago on the basis that it was racially gerrymandered. And one of the things that the judges said was that there was no evidence that the maps in Illinois were racially gerrymandered. All of the evidence pointed to the fact that they were redrawn on the basis of partisan politics, which is legal in the map-making world. Partisan gerrymandering is not illegal, at least under current judicial standards. So where does that leave us? There's also no prohibition against mid-decade remapping, although it's somewhat unusual. And also, I guess, unusual for people to just come right out and say that's what they're doing. But so where does that leave us? I mean, is it just going to be all 50 states just redrawing their maps every 2 years to squeeze out every little bit of advantage one party or the other can get?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the direction we could be heading with this. I think here in Illinois, we're not really moving in that direction because our map is already so gerrymandered, where squeezing out another Democrat district, for one, could be a little bit challenging to make 15 out of the 17 districts, leaning to the left, but also just because if Texas is creating 5 new Republican-leaning seats, Illinois creating 1 doesn't make a whole lot of difference at the end of the day, especially if other states get involved. So for one, I think Illinois is a little bit taking a back seat to this, even though the governor is, taking the front seat up in this in the Democrat Party and trying to lead the fight. We don't really see any movement happening here in Illinois. And the governor kind of admitted that when we asked him about that at the state fair on Thursday. But, as far as those claims about the racial gerrymandering go, I think you bring up a good point about how Illinois' maps have been found to be legal by the courts. One of the governor's main accusations against Texas cheating and drawing an illegal map is that he says Texas Republicans are seeking to break up a bunch of districts that are currently compliant with the Federal Voting Rights Act because they do account for the minority representation that federal law requires in districts and keeping communities together. So I think that's kind of one of those areas we're going to have to watch is, what do the courts say about this? Not just the political gerrymandering part, but where are the courts potentially going to draw the line on what's considered a legal district when it comes to splitting up communities of interest?
Okay, well, to give people an idea of just how big this issue has gotten and what kind of a national profile it has taken on, a couple days after the Democrats landed in Chicago, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Ken Martin, came to Illinois to have yet another press conference, and here's part of what he had to say.
This is not the Democratic Party of your grandfather, which would bring a pencil to the knife fight. This is a new Democratic Party. We're bringing a knife to a knife fight, and we are going to fight fire with fire.
Okay, so that is DNC Chairman Ken Martin speaking in support of the Democratic lawmakers from Texas who had fled to Illinois. I want to point out, Ken Martin is fairly new to the job. He was just elected chairman of the party early in 2025 following the Democrats' loss in the presidential race in 2024. And part of his job was to address a lot of the consternation within the party. Many Democrats were extremely frustrated that they lost to President Trump again in 2024. And so he was brought in to try and reshape the party and make it more competitive for the next time around. All of that by way of segueing to our next topic, which is the Illinois State Fair getting underway this week and coming up on Wednesday of this coming week will be the Governor's Day at the fair, which is the huge celebration by Illinois Democrats where they showcase their candidates, and that would be followed Thursday by Republican Day, where they are supposed to showcase their candidates. So, Ben, as we sit here right now, in terms of statewide elections, where are the Democrats right now? I assume they're feeling pretty good. They've got some competitive races coming up. And what are we expecting to hear from the Democrats on Wednesday?
Yeah, I think Illinois Democrats are in a pretty good place just as far as the party goes and as far as party infrastructure goes. They have two primaries that are setting up for two statewide seats. We have two candidates already in the comptroller's race to replace Susana Mendoza. We have three big name candidates in the U.S. Senate race to replace Dick Durbin. So they're in a pretty good place as far as voters are going to certainly have some options and certainly have some campaigns to watch. We know that the speaker's probably going to be out trying to target some pickups in the General Assembly, same with the Senate president. And of course, you have J.B. Pritzker is going to be running for re-election again, which kind of avoided, an even bigger battle within the party for some recognition. And, we've seen the governor has done pretty well in his two elections that he's won. So it's probably, going to be kind of a optimistic tone I think we're going to see from Democrats as far as their 2026 chances here in Illinois goes. But I'm expecting that there's going to be a major focus on everything that's happening at the national level. Obviously we're playing host to the Texas delegation right now, which is certainly the biggest story in national politics at the moment. So we're going to hear, I think, a lot about that issue. We're going to hear a ton about Donald Trump and everything that Democrats dislike about the president and congressional Republicans. It'll certainly be a little bit different than last year when there was so much focus on Kamala Harris as the new candidate. There was a ton of optimism on the Democrat side that they were going to defeat Donald Trump once and for all. Of course, a couple months later, after the fair last year, we know that Donald Trump won and won pretty easily in his election, which really seemed to take the wind out of the sail for Democrats for a bit. But, J.B. Pritzker has been one of the loudest people opposing Donald Trump, as we've talked about. So I think we're going to kind of hear a little bit, out of the governor's playbook, a lot of fighting back against Donald Trump. We have Hakeem Jeffries. He's going to be the keynote speaker for Democrats. So that's certainly going to have us so focused on national politics as well.
So Hakeem Jeffries is currently the U.S. House Minority Leader. He stands to become Speaker of the House if Democrats were to regain the majority. And that's part of what all of this redistricting state by state is all about. What do we expect to hear from Mr. Jeffries on Wednesday?
Yeah, I don't think he can come here and not talk about this situation happening in Texas because Illinois is at the middle of this fight. And it's a fight that, as you mentioned, certainly affects him and his political future in 2026. Obviously, we've seen a lot of policies that Democrats really despise that congressional Republicans got passed earlier this summer. And the only way to really stand in the way against Donald Trump's agenda right now, given that D.C. is dominated by both him and a majority of Republicans in Congress, is for Democrats to take back one of the houses of Congress. And the U.S. House is a very thin majority for Republicans right now. And Democrats back in Donald Trump's first midterm election in 2018 did exceptionally well. They won a ton of seats in 2018. So they're really hoping to capitalize on that this year. And I think we're going to hear a lot of talk about this Texas situation, how it could affect national politics. And, overall from Hakeem Jeffries, the continuing need to fight against Donald Trump.
Okay, and then at the other end of the spectrum, we have Illinois Republicans who have their big day on Thursday. You're getting ready to publish a story looking ahead to that. What are we expecting to hear from Republicans, and how is their situation different from Democrats this year?
Yeah, of course we know the Republicans are the minority party in Illinois, so you don't have as big of events or as many things going on. Their main speaker is going to be a Fox News analyst this year, but the thing we're really, I think, going to miss here at the state fair is the candidates for statewide office. Obviously, it's not, there's no nominees for the party yet, so they're not ready to trot out anybody as endorsed candidates by the party, but we really don't have any candidates in the Republican Party right now for comptroller, treasurer, or secretary of state. The attorney general candidate at the moment that we know of is Bob Fioretti, who has never successfully really won an election in his career and has run in both parties to try and become elected to various offices. The governor's race is very quiet at the moment. We have the DuPage County Sheriff is the most notable person in that race at the moment. The U.S. Senate race is very quiet on the Republican side. A lot of folks have, filed federal campaign fundraising requirements, but they're not really names in Illinois politics. They're not elected to anything. They're just more regular people trying to seek that seat. We're waiting to hear from Don Tracy to see if he's interested in running. He is the former chair of the Illinois Republican Party. So I'm very curious to see kind of just what their optimism is like in 2026, because, last year they came to the fair. They were very optimistic that Donald Trump was going to win. They were correct on that. Tony McCombie wanted to pick up 5 seats in the Illinois House. That didn't happen, but she also didn't lose seats, which frankly is a pretty decent victory for her, given how hard Democrats tried to take more seats away from her caucus. So none of that is just really in play yet. We don't know what the General Assembly matchups are going to look like quite yet for 2026. And there's nobody at the top of the Republican ticket at the moment who's going to be an exciting person that's going to turn people out to vote for Republicans. So, from what I hear when I talk to Republicans, and I talked to Illinois GOP Chair Kathy Salvi earlier this week, is they're very excited about Donald Trump's presidency. They think he's doing a great job. They're very happy about the big, beautiful bill. And we're going to hear a lot about Trump and what congressional Republicans have gotten passed. But that's going to be their platform, at least in Illinois here, going into the 26th election. But they don't have anybody at the top of the ticket to capitalize on that. So it'll be kind of interesting to hear what they think their chances actually are of winning here in Illinois next year.
I remember one of the things that we were all talking about leading up to the Republican National Convention last year was that here in Illinois, for a long time, you had billionaires like Bruce Rauner, Ken Griffin, Richard Uihlein, who could write out big checks and underwrite statewide campaigns. Those people are all gone now, and there wasn't that much of a small donor list at the state party level to raise money. So where do Republicans in Illinois go now to get the kind of money that it's going to take to win races on a statewide or congressional district kind of level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for one, it might help if they can convince Dick Uihlein, who's the last of those 3 very rich people who's still in Illinois, to actually write a check and to get involved in one of these races. We saw him support Darren Bailey, but he didn't appear that enthused, where he gave Bailey enough money to make a meaningful difference in Bailey's campaign. We haven't really seen him be involved since then. We don't know what he's interested in, if anything at all, in 2026, which means the Republican Party is going to need some small donors. Democrats do get small donors, even though they have a lot of labor union support and obviously J.B. Pritzker's money that they can use. It's a major money problem for Illinois Republicans. And as much as you hear about grassroots campaigns and the door knocking and recruiting volunteers, at the end of the day, money still means something in politics. It's not necessarily the best fundraiser who wins every election, but in order to get your name out, you need money in today's political world to be on TV and commercials, to have digital ads on social media. And Republicans just don't have a whole lot of room to use, and they kind of split the pot among themselves a lot, and they just really don't have the ability to get their name out there to the level that's necessary to be competitive.
Okay, well, maybe we will hear something at the state fair that will point to a new direction for Republicans this time around. In the meantime, that's all the time we have for this edition of Capital Cast. Capital Cast is a production of Capital News Illinois, a public affairs reporting project of the Illinois Press Foundation, with significant funding from the Robert R. McCormick Foundation. Until next time, this is Peter Hancock. I want to say thank you to Ben Szalinski for being here this week. And on behalf of the entire Capital News Illinois team, thank you for listening.